lovely holiday worth celebrating.
Hello there, Internet. Welcome to episode number 4 of Progress Day. And I'm Mogwai, of course. Or not, of course. I don't know. Very bad at intros. I'm joined here by ImpetuousPanda and Swim. How you guys doing?
Very good. Thanks for having us once again, Mogwai.
I'm great. It's a little early for me. We record these at like 7 a.m. my time, but apart from that, I'm doing lovely.
Yeah, just so you guys understand, like there's like 6 hours difference between us, or no, 9, right?
It's like it's 8 or 9, or it's a high amount.
Yeah, it's like 4 p.m. for us, so yeah, early as well. And yeah, today it's more or less the same. We're gonna be talking about a lot of stuff today. We have a big subject to tackle, which is gonna be most of the podcast, and that is the big juicy balanced patch notes. I mixed 2 words there. We have a lot to say, so without further ado, we're just gonna hop into it. But I'm gonna let my boy Panda, the host, take it over. So yeah, take it away.
So first of all, before talking about the patch notes, which is the big topic that happens, today, what we're uploading tomorrow, so yesterday. Almost 2 weeks ago, so right after the last Progress Day, there was a big tournament on Thursday 2 weeks ago, which was Twitch Rivals, and you guys both participated in it. Obviously, that was the first major tournament for Runeterra, and it was kind of officially sanctioned because Twitch was running it, not Riot, but still some affiliation there. And there was a $100,000 prize pool. You guys both played in it. You guys both played against each other. There was some drama involved with the community mostly, and a bit with you guys as well, but overall, I think you guys have resolved any.
Pretty much all the community.
Yeah. We already settled our differences. We fought to the death over a pot of lava, and Sean died, but he's back. It's fine. No, it's like it's basically like nothing. Like people, I saw in my comment section. Like I spoke about this a lot with Swim. Like it's very hard to control. Like a big. Like when you have a lot of people watching you, like every individual is different, right? And people are gonna take things differently. So it's just like I felt like some people definitely overreacted. I was emotional during the time, right? Because it's a tournament. There was money involved, and me and Swim have spoken about how we hate the timer thing and everything, and yeah, it just happened and then whatever, and or here we are. So
in conclusion, I think it's safe to say there's not really any bad blood at all, and it was obviously for the most part, I think 90% of the way, just an unfortunate kind of rule and situation overall. But anything else you guys want to say about your own specific tournament experiences? You guys did both get to the finals, Swim to the winners bracket final, and Mogwai to the losers bracket final, which he did win. But you guys both started off kind of on the wrong foot when the tournament started off with kind of surprise losses. So aside from that, any other conclusions you guys want to talk about the tournament?
Yeah, I mean, no, go ahead.
Okay. Well, I was just gonna say I probably should have brought Burn. Pretty good deck.
I mean,
Burn carried Crip so hard. Yeah. He dropped 1 game with it all tournament, and it was to you, Mogwai.
Yeah, no. His Burn got a win on me too.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Like I mulliganed. I got like three standalones and an unyielding spirit opening hand, and when I saw the turn 1 Legion rearguard, I was like, okay, it's gonna be fun, and we can tell how that ended. Yeah, that's one of the things that I found a little bit. That's like actually one of perhaps the thing that was most frustrating to me for the tournament was that deck. Like the fact that. Like no disrespect or anything, right? But
lay it down, Mogwai.
Like the fact that I believe there's some players. Yeah, there's some players who got like very easy wins with that deck, and it just goes to show how unhealthy that deck is, in my opinion. Like I don't know, like I don't think it really highlighted how a complete lack of experience can be somewhat mitigated by a deck that just kind of like plays itself right and does really well at doing so. So that was perhaps the highlight frustration for me, like seeing that. Like I kept losing to that deck. I was like soft teched against it, and I still, because I drew poorly, I still got blown back by it. It was frustrating. Right.
Swim, any thoughts on your run?
Yeah, no, I mean pretty much the same thing. Overall, I don't know. It went okay. It's like it's a very very weird tournament just because the field is extremely different.
Yeah.
Like I was actually, so me and Dog brought like Gavardia's lineup from the Mav tournament 3 days before, and I brought the lineup that got second place to Gavardia's lineup. Him being on the Swain deck, and I was prepping that lineup. I was prepping the Swain deck. I had Gavardia in my test group, and I had an improved version of that deck, and I prepped it for like 4 hours, and then I decided not to bring it because I felt like the field and the kind of decks I expected from this sort of tournament environment would have actually made it like a bit weaker. It's just because there's so much unpredictability in a tournament like this, right?
That was the biggest problem, and that was like I don't want to just pull out excuses here or anything, right? But that was like the biggest reason for like my round 1 loss. It's like I had a specific lineup. I was basically hard targeting Karina control, and I was soft targeting Burn at the same time with my lineup, right? And when I saw my first opponent, and then we were running like Swain with Shadow Isles, and then very strange like Lux. It wasn't even Lux Hammer. There was like Lux Vi deck, right? Which is really thick units. That's not a lineup that I could ever predict, and that's more likely to happen in a tournament like Twitch Rivals, in which there's different levels of experience and overall perspectives, right? Than in like an all masters, sort of like try hard tournament in which everybody, I don't know, I definitely felt like it was much more wild in that sense, right? It's hard.
That's completely my experience. Like in the first round, I lost versus Crit, which everyone bullied me for, and I lost because he brought this one of his decks was like it was Noxus P&Z, and he was just running a lot of like low cost cards. And all of his cards just reduced my Nexus health. Like every single card, it was just like he had Crimson Disciple, Legion Rearguard, just all of them, and then I just got 0 health and lost. It's the worst.
It doesn't feel good, yeah.
Yeah.
I think also the fact that I was talking to Miguel a bit before the tournament, not only is it a bit unpredictable, but also you have this, very large pressure to perform because you are seen as a favorite. You are seen as this, kind of a superior bracket of players with people that have been, you guys been streaming the game and playing the game consistently at a very high level for a few months, with like Pokrovok as well and a few other streamers, and other players like Crip and a few other streamers haven't been playing well much at all. So there's like a big more expectation for you guys to perform, and that could also mentally be kind of a hard thing going into the tournament as well.
Yeah, but overall it was a fun experience. Like I enjoyed my time in the dumpster bracket. Like it was fun. It was fun. Like I had some fun games. I actually got to play a lot of Karma Ezreal, which I had not really played that much before. But I put a lot of practice into it, and actually, as degenerate of late game as it can be, it is very fun to set up. And I had some really, really cool matches, especially like my matchups against They Who Endure and using my damage to not kill their units, but instead, pile up. There was a lot of cool decision making, and it's just fun to start blasting as well, right? So it was fun. Like I had fun in the tournament, and it was a good time. And shout outs to Dog. He did exceptionally well, and of course Swim as well, who made it to the finals too. And overall, it was some good times. But I definitely do have to admit that as a competitor, like I enjoyed myself a bit more in the like Monokuma one that I played a while back, because that was more maybe it's because it was easier to predict, right? But at the same time, like everybody had a very serious lineup, and it was really fun as well. But overall, it was great. It's good times.
Yeah. No, it's the same thing. It's like it's more competitive when like everyone is kind of on the level, and you have some kind of anticipation of what people will bring. And then if they bring something surprising, it's because they're out gaming you instead of just bringing random stuff,
Yeah.
Right. Well, that's Twitch Rivals talked about. Hopefully, there will be more tournaments like this in the future. We talked about in the last episode about kind of TFT having a certain invitational, 6 months with a few tournaments here and there, and then with like Twitch Rivals as well, and then having kind of their esports scene now. So maybe Runeterra will follow in those footsteps. We'll have to see that still. But the patch notes came out yesterday. That's kind of the focal point of the podcast today. And alongside the patch notes, some of you may remember from the last, or Progress Day number 2, 3 months ago, I also did a survey at that time. and I've started now repeating it now that the game is launched officially. I'm going to continue doing this every month. And basically, it's a survey that tries to capture the perception of balance from the community as a whole. So mostly through Reddit, but also, I post it on Twitter, etc. And the idea is to get the opinions of the general community on all the champions and kind of their power levels, as well as the problematic cards in each region. So to make it, not biased and not, too subjective, I try and pick 6 cards that I think are most controversial. So not necessarily the most unbalanced, because that would be kind of biased for me to decide, but the cards that I see are, mentioned the most or complained about or generally talked about a lot for each region. Because some regions are on a different power level, it's hard to get 6 cards in Freljord that are overpowered.
We struggled with that.
With Demacia, it's very easy, and you have to kind of fight to see who gets those 6 spots. Same for Ionia, so that's the reason for that. But overall, with the survey, I kind of streamlined the results where I only mentioned the cards that got rated above a certain threshold. So it makes it, I think, a bit better to see. But the general survey itself was posted on Wednesday of last week, and it lasted about 3 to 4 days. If you're interested in participating and haven't done it this time around, I'll be doing this every month before the balance patch of the week before. You'll see the survey on my Twitter profile or on Reddit if you visit Reddit, and you can participate, and then you'll see the results as well. So for anyone that wants to get involved, you can.
By the way, if you want to check out the actual results from this one, needless to say, though, there'll be a description, the link down below, and you guys can check it out there. Yeah, you'll just. I think the results were actually really, honestly, they were really good. I think they were pretty accurate when it comes to my own perspective. It matched up with a lot of, the way I see it, basically. And I definitely, and obviously, like we are going to be talking about the patch notes, right? And a lot of those results do match up really well with the changes that we're going to be talking about. And I think it's about time we jump into that stuff, right? That's what you guys want to really hear about in today's video. And without further ado, let's get down to it. We got this. I got the patch notes here in like in Spanish, but it was we were going over there earlier, and Swim's take on it was interesting.
I got it. I got it all translated. I actually think I'm like half fluent in the language at this point.
I definitely concur, for sure. Let me get it right here. There we go. Make sure. All right. So we're just going to be going over the individual changes. We're going to start off with the champions, and we're going to be talking about each change and giving our general thoughts and everything. So yeah, without further ado, let's start off with one of my personal favorite changes. I'm very excited for this one. Your boy Vladimir got a buff, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to be talking about Vladimir's buff when he levels up. Now, instead of dealing damage only, he drains. So he will be healing you for the amount of damage that he's dealing as well, which I think is both a very, very significant buff, especially considering how one of the weaker matchups for the self-harm archetype was generally aggressive decks that killed you before, especially if you're playing units like the Ember Maiden, like damaging yourself could actually be a liability. And also something that I realized is Ember Maiden against opposing like Crimson Disciples from aggro decks was also a bit tricky to justify, right? But having Vladimir heal you up is really neat for that. And overall, something that's also very important is that it's a very flavorful change as well. Like it fits Vladimir. Like he's a vampire. He's just draining your life. Like it makes the card. It just feels like the more complete card now with it. And I really like it. How impactful it'll ultimately be and how good it'll make Vladimir. Obviously, it's early to say, at least for me. But I'm a big fan. What do you guys think?
Yeah, no, I mean, it always kind of was weird that Vlad was, the vampire, but he doesn't have like any sort of lifesteal or drain kind of like interactions. I like it. It's kind of like right on the level. I think it has a chance of making him pretty solid, and it's flavorful.
And it adds like kind of a something that wasn't found in Noxus or in, I guess most of the time it's paired with Freljord with like self-damage decks that there aren't really that many heals. So it allows for like the deck to have a bit more sustain and a bit more lifesteal or drain against things like aggro, which may not exist at the same level after the patch, but still it's something to consider to have like more options, not just Shadow Isles with drain. But yeah, like Mogwai said, like, the biggest thing is that it's flavorful. I think a lot of people kind of underestimate or don't really look at cards when they're balanced or changed. They just suggest like certain stat lines, or they suggest certain reworks that don't make sense from like a lore or flavor perspective, whereas this makes like perfect sense. It's like a little bonus, little nudge to Vladimir as a whole. Not a huge buff, but it just makes a lot of sense as well. So it's really cool to see.
So now we're going to be talking about Karma. Karma got nerfed, but in a pretty straightforward way, unlike Vladimir here. I mean, they do pretext this by saying that most of the changes that they make in this patch are, numerical, right? But they made an exception with Vladimir. So I'm going to let you guys start off on this one. What do you guys think about the change to Karma from 5 cost to 6 cost?
So yeah, this is kind of one of the changes I had in mind. I've always felt, people have complained for ages. Rework Ezreal and Karma. We've talked about this, Mogwai. We've, stated our opinions on this. I think that in both cases, I don't like the idea of like straight up redesigns. I do like Karma's effect, and I like it existing in the game. But I also agree that she was kind of too strong as she was. Now, the question is 6 mana going to make a difference? Because of course, mostly you play her like past turn 10 anyway. I don't know. What do you guys think, Panda?
Panda has a strong opinion on this one.
Shaking your head.
I'm not a fan of Karma. I mean that's known. I'm not a huge fan of like super control decks that like play 40 turns in a game and games last 20 minutes overall. But also I think just the options with Karma and Ezreal and Heimer are very strong, and Ionia in general. I thought this for a while, but personally I think Karma, a 1 mana difference does not do anything because she's played turn 10 in most meta decks, and it kind of revolves around or turn 9 after the opponent has spent mana, so it can't be answered, and then you just go turn 10 crazy with full mana just to use on spells. I think a proper nerf would be a limit on her ability, so it can have unlimited value, something like Twisted Fate having 3 Destiny cards per turn when it's leveled up as like a maximum, as a cap, so you can't just go crazy and do like wild stuff. If Karma gets a cap as well, so like 2 double spells per turn, or maybe 3, but I think 2 is a generous amount. I think already that's okay. Even then, looking at something like Anivia, has a very similar role as Karma, in terms of low stat line, very strong effect when it goes off, kind of full board wipe. Karma is obviously it's a different effect, but still kind of the same, I think, level of champion, the same like general bracket. And Anivia is 7 mana, and obviously it's very weak right now. That is true, but mostly because of things like Devourer, for example, that really counter it. But I think Karma falls into that same thing and that same like level. And 7 mana wouldn't also drastically change. So if they would have done a mana change, I think it should have been at least a 7, like from 5 to 7. I think that's completely justified. But if they look at like actual ability, I think limiting the amount of spells that are doubled per turn would be an interesting solution.
I love the comparison to Twisted Fate. I think that's a very good subject to tackle regarding this card. Because I think Twisted Fate is like he's my personal favorite champion in the game right now. He's amazing. Like I love just playing with him and working to level him up, and he feels just so satisfying. He's also very skill intensive too, because he makes the stack, but then she's very awkward in certain cases as well, right? Like you have to like navigate with that. But there's always a cap. That's super relevant. Like no matter there's always a point in which Twisted Fate doesn't give you any extra fuel anymore, and I would like to see something like that with Karma. I agree with Swim. Like I think Karma is good for the game. It's fun to have this crazy late game just engine that's just gonna make you do all sorts of wacky stuff, right? But I just don't think rummage into deep meditation and to just like draw your entire deck is fine, right? Like I just don't think the fact. I also hate how her signature card is Inside of Ages, and how it's just like a Karma on board, and like Mago once says, like when he built the Karma deck with spiders, so I just need Karma and a Karma in hand, and I win at turn 10. And it's kind of true. It's kind of true. That's what I don't like about Karma. Like Twisted Fate, you gotta work for it. You gotta find the right time to play him. You gotta make sure you build a deck that can protect him. Some good stuff. That's why I like playing him with Twin Disciplines and stuff like that. And you gotta also you gotta get working. Like you gotta draw cards, and leveling up is not easy by any means, right? But it's that big payoff when you do. With Karma, it's just like, I gotta make it to turn 10. It's like you're not doing anything besides that. And that's why I've been very against this champion for a while. I do like her actual ability. I do believe perhaps making her 7 mana and have this restriction would be going a little bit overboard. Like I would rather have her cost around what she costs now, but have that limit. And I think that will eventually happen. I don't know. Maybe I would like for it to.
I was mentioning mostly one or the other, not.
Okay.
I think both would be too much.
Okay.
Even like doing the spell restriction and leaving her at 5 mana would also be fine. I think the spell restriction is a bigger nerf than putting her up to 7. I think that's the biggest thing about it. But also what you mentioned about getting to turn 10, now more than ever, especially now after this patch with Burn, we'll see it, but getting some nerfs. And the fact that you have cards like Eye of the Dragon added to the game that allows you to sustain and survive the early game so much better with Ionia. And also with cards like Radiant Guardian that we see in Karma Lux is huge at just surviving. It makes it easier and easier. It's not like this huge challenge, like you said, like leveling up Twisted Fate is. Getting to turn 10 isn't that hard, with Ionia and Demacia being very, very strong colors at the moment.
Yeah, no, I agree completely. The one thing is that, like, I don't think the current patch note, I don't think that the change from 5 to 6 mana is going to be like entirely insignificant. Like, I think it will actually change a decent amount in terms of like when you're able to use Karma. Like, a really large part of Karma is when you don't really have mana to protect her, you're kind of like waiting on those like 5, 6, 7, 8 turns for your opponent to maybe play below a certain mana amount so you can drop her. And like specific to that, the opponent has to sit and be like, okay, my opponent has kept 5 mana up, I can't spend my mana. And that's kind of like, that's a really important component of Karma. And because of that, she just passively won't lock you out of plays as much.
Also less relevant, but still could come into play is the fact that you can't now play 2 Karmas in the same turn. Like if one gets removed and you were to play it another. This is not something that happens too often by any means, but it's something that can potentially happen, and it's now no longer possible, which is important to note out. Regardless, we'll see. I think it definitely won't be too impactful. I think Karma will still be very relevant. But it's nice for them to start acknowledging this champion because she's been like unchanged for forever. So it's nice for them to like acknowledge it. Let's move over to Shen though. Our boy Shen got buffed. Very straightforward change. He went from 2 power or attack to 3, which enables him to block into fearsomes amongst other things. What do you guys think about this change for Shen?
It's pretty interesting. I mean, the Shen archetype, we've seen it built in a couple of different ways, mostly Shen plus Demacia, a lot of barriers. It's actually been pretty competitive in the past. I think people that are kind of new to this game might be surprised by that. There was like 1 week where it was kind of the cool thing to do, to run like Shen Bannerman or just like Shen Demacia.
Are you talking about when Super JJ made it to like #1 with that deck?
Yeah, and I think 6-0 as well. Like there were 2 or 3 different people like messing around with it. Yeah. And then there was Shen Deluxe for a little bit as well. It's very possible. I think in an odd way, the biggest buff to Shen is probably nerfs to other Demacia cards that we'll talk about later. But that will allow you to actually maybe run that kind of thing again without feeling like, oh, I'm cutting these auto-include cards. So I think this champion has a chance for sure.
Yeah, I think it won't obviously spring into like the super strong or overpowered or like top tier 1 meta deck, but I think it will become a bit more viable. And the increase from 2 to 3 is just 1 point, but it's a very important point of damage because you kill so many more things in the mid game and you can trade with so many more things. So, and it always felt bad attacking because you need to attack with Shen to get the support keyword working to get the barrier, and attacking with a 2 power unit in the like turns 4, 5, 6 doesn't get much done in terms of trading. And now with 3, I think it will help that a lot. So I think he wasn't that weak before. I mean, I think he was obviously like Swim said, he was just very overshadowed in Demacia because why run anything that isn't just like mid-range Bannerman, like strong stuff. And now I think he might see a bit more play and be viable.
And for those of you who may be confused why we're talking so much about Demacia when talking about Shen, is because Shen, generally, you have to play him with Demacia. Like right now, with the current card pool, it doesn't really make... And I've tried, and I'm pretty sure I'm not the only one who has tried. But it's just like, it's hard to justify him outside of Demacia because that's where all the barrier synergy is at. That's where... Like, on top of that, I feel like one of the main reasons to play Shen right now is to work for a late game with the Brightsteel formation, because Shen with Brightsteel formation is pretty funny. Like, it gives you all the... But it's true, like, when you look at, staples like the Badger Bear and the Grizzle Ranger, which we'll be talking about shortly. These cards like just kind of like there was no reason to run a mid-range version of the Demacia deck around outside of Bannerman if you're purely wanting to be competitive. And now Shen will definitely have a lot more breathing room in that sense. And like you guys have mentioned, the 3 attack is super relevant. Trading into fearsomes and the fact that he eats 2 3s. Like that's really big. That's super relevant. Like War Chef, Crimson Disciple, all those they no longer can just trade into him and get out of that, right? And that's very, very important. So happy to see my boy Shen getting some love, and hopefully we'll see some cool decks, some cool Demacia Ionia decks built with him. Let's talk.
The big
sorry. No, go. I was getting ahead of myself.
Interrupted your whole transition. I'm
you
sorry.
Fucked it up. It's okay.
I think the whole topic with pairing Shen with Demacia is a lot of champions have like this almost necessary secondary region that you can't really like. The same with Nautilus and Shadow Isles.
Yasuo and Noxus,
Yeah, Quinn with Scouts with Demacia as well. There's certain champions that aren't really like these.
Yeah, exactly.
Solitary identities. You have to pair them with like the game tells you, okay, you have to build it with this. For the most part, I think Shen is part of that as well.
Yeah, it's just a card pool, but it could change, as we get more cards, and maybe because it's important for regions to have identity, but it's also important for regions to be multifaceted as well, right? Like that's a different subject, right? But like for example, Shadow Isle is in a very good place in that regard right now. But then you have champions like Shen that are more limited. Regardless, sorry, Jesus.
I'm sorry, man. I'm sorry.
Fuck you guys! I'm going home.
There's one more thing I want to mention with Shen,
okay.
which actually might be relevant. Which is that in the past there has been this idea of the Green Blade Caretaker deck that uses Shen, and you kind of just go for a one-hit combo with Caretaker. And like kind of like the most committed versions of that list have run Kinko Wayfinder to try to pull out Caretakers. You pull out like 2 Caretakers, and then you go to town. You've got all the barrier synergy. You got Shen, and one interesting thing is Demacia is getting nerfed, but B, most importantly, the biggest reason the deck never worked is because Ionian didn't have enough good cards. And now with some of the good cards added in Rising Tides, there might be a re-emergence of that exact playstyle, like Caretaker plus Wayfinder plus
that's a neat idea. Yeah.
Demacia Splash for barriers.
Yeah, like focusing, because generally when you build Shen, it's more of like a big Demacia component and a splash of
These
Ionia.
days,
But that's a neat concept. I've never explored that myself, so that could be pretty cool now.
I have. It used to be bad, but maybe it's good now.
Well, let us know. And now we are going to transition into we're going to be talking about speaking of multifaceted, like we're going to be talking about perhaps the most auto include what I like to refer as this season's Hecarim, and that is Vi, which got nerfed, and I think this is something that we all expected. In fact, Vi in particular was number 2 right after Karma in your survey results, right, Panda? This is a very, very relevant change. Going from 5 to 4 health has a lot of implications. Like, she no longer survives trading into 5/5s, like, for example, Radiant Guardians or opposing Garens. And I'm only mentioning Demacia cards right now because I had to think more, right? But obviously she's easier to take down, which is relevant. The fact that Vi was an auto-include in every single deck that had built over in Zon it's just a testament of like how unhealthy she was. It's basically what Hecarim was back in the day. Do you guys think this nerf is enough though to take that role away from her as like auto-include? Yes or no?
I think it'll bump her down a bit for sure. I mean, you were saying she's auto-include in every deck that runs PNC, and the funny thing is, she's auto-include in decks that don't run PNC too. Like true, Bannerman would literally just cut Garen and put Vi in, just like slap it in, right? They might not do that anymore, right? Like she will see some amount of decline in play for sure off of this 1 health, but she will still see some play as well.
Yeah, I think she continues fulfilling her role as like a mid-range, strong unit that can kind of stay on the board and stay sticky for decks like Heimer Vi, for example, that need something in the mid game to help mitigate damage and help keep control of the board until Heimer can go off, basically. So I think it's just going to continue fulfilling that role. Like 1 health difference isn't massive. she's still gonna get. She's with tough. She's still gonna get 2 trades off against most boards, I think, in the mid game. But like Swim said, I think she might, not. Because I mean, Hecarim was the same before, where he was thrown into decks that had no ephemeral synergy, he was just a huge, nice, big body, and he was thrown in. And I think Vi was the same, and now maybe not as relegated as Hecarim was. I think she's still gonna be played and still gonna be a top 10 champion in the game probably, but yeah, not as strong or as impressive, I think.
Yeah, and speaking of Hecarim, Hecarim is getting a bit of a buff this time around. His power is going up from 4 to 5. So they definitely seem against the idea of bringing him back to his old resilience, which was one of the, arguably one of the strongest traits Hecarim used to have. Because you guys, some of you are watching and you joined in the game, with the Rising Tides expansion or the official release. You did not know the old version of Hecarim used to be a 4/6 that spawned 2 3/2 Ghost Riders. And this was deemed to be the best champion in the game. It was an auto-include in every Shadow Owls deck, and it got a very strong nerf hit on him. This is one of the most power nerfs that I've seen from the Riot development team on this game. He went down from a 4/6 to a 4/5 and got the power reduced from the Ghost Riders from 3 to 2, which was a significant downgrade in stats. And now they're bringing that back up a little bit. But they're still against the idea, it seems, to give him that 6 health back. But instead, now with this 5 attack, he will be able to trade evenly into not only the likes of Garen or other 5 drops that have 5 health, but also into the newly nerfed Vi as well, which is pretty relevant, right? Like now, both of them, if they clash, will go down. And before, that was definitely not the case. So, nice buff. I'm honestly I don't know how impactful this how good this will be for Hecarim. Like if he will actually be relevant in any sort of way after this. But it's definitely a nice step in the right direction to making this champion relevant again, and I welcome it.
Yeah, I think it'll probably end up being a bit less about the trading and more about like the overwhelm. Because ephemeral decks will often try to like push the opponent into a corner, and there's so many situations where that like overwhelm plus like the riders, maybe a chariot if they're doing that kind of thing, will just be that like you're like you need to block in just the right way so that they can't kill you with mark, and that one point of attack can actually make that very awkward. But I do agree overall. Ephemeral's in a kind of a weird place right now. Like they have gotten a bit of support too, but it's just like it feels very weird trying to play around with ephemeral decks. I don't expect this will be enough to make it big.
It's just the complete lack of defense, right? Like that's
exactly. And they don't have enough. They're not like Burn where they can't just rail you so quickly that you like offense can't be.
They have to set up
for them,
and they have to. They take a while doing so. Yeah, that's very true.
Yeah, I agree. I think Hecarim himself is going to be in a good spot after this buff. Like he's a good champion in general for his mana cost, but the ephemeral package I think is still going to be just not good enough support to make that archetype a thing. It's never really been a thing. I mean, ephemeral and all the time that we've closed beta and now with a full release as well has never had a deck that you could play on ladder and be like not even tier 3 even, like it's not really a thing. Like it's no one has played ephemerals to masters, basically is what I'm trying to say.
I mean,
so something has to change.
I was trying to defend a little bit because I do enjoy. But it's a fun deck, but it definitely has like big flaws. But I do enjoy mixing. I think Maokai is secretly like very good support to the ephemerals. Like Maokai is like actually one of the low key like one of the best things that happened to ephemerals. Yep. But
and also Blighted Caretaker.
Yeah, Blighted Caretaker too. But it's unfortunately not hasn't proven to be enough, right? But I have had a lot of fun. Like it's undeniably very fun though to combine Maokai and Hecarim in that sense. And hopefully this little buff can maybe make the deck a little bit more relevant. But definitely not going to be a tier 1 beast. Not quite there yet. But it could be in the future if they get more support. It's just you have to find the way to patch up that big weakness of like, hey, we're an archetype that requires setup. Has a decent payoff, especially against control decks. Like I've actually been playing some Shark Chariot decks lately, and they're really good against like Karma Ezreal decks or just late game decks in general, right? Like they give you that nice burst potential. But unfortunately, all this setup without like any sort of like proper defense makes you crumble really easily to mid-range decks, especially those of Bannerman nature, right? So, but it's nice. It's nice to see him buffed, and we'll see how things change up. But that's it for the champions. That's all the champions, buffs, and nerfs. We're going to be moving on to Adeptos y Hechizos, aka followers and spells. Like, someone's very confused with the Adeptos. Like, what is this? So yeah, we're gonna start off talking about Cuerno Largo. I don't know his name I actually don't know the name of this card in English.
That's funny because I don't know his name in Spanish.
Wait, let me. I'm gonna search Scout real quick.
Actually,
it's Great Horn.
The great
big moose.
And I shouldn't have done that because I have the zoom on this side of the monitor, so I'm showing the Runeterra now to you guys. Professional, but yeah, it is the moose. We're called the Great Horn Moose guy. The 4/5 drop with Scout that none of you knew existed. Got a buff. And has 5 power now, which, in my opinion, is actually pretty scary for like turn 3 remembrance. I think it's terrifying. Well, I don't know. What do you guys think in general about this?
Yeah, it's more of a buff to remembrance than
buff
to this card. It's like, I mean, you're still not gonna run this card, right? Are you? Maybe. Oh God. I don't think you can.
Oh, the light bulb popped. It's like, oh, maybe.
Yeah, no, I don't think so. I mean, the one way is like if you have some degenerate way to like give it elusive, you could try to do some silly combo. But reasonably speaking, you are mostly getting this off of remembrance, and it's a pretty big buff to remembrance, right? It's
definitely.
like the 1/4. It does turn this into like a major pressure tool, so it'll help, Karma, Lux, and that kind of deck.
Yeah, which definitely needs help.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah, I think it's the slot it's in the region is in. It's way too competitive to see play. I mean, right now even you already have problems kind of seeing what slots go to who with like Garen, Swiftling Lancer, and Radiant Guardian as well. And yeah, there's no way this card sees play because it's just way too competitive at that mana bracket basically for Demacia.
Yeah.
So
it's not a bad card per se. It's just outclassed by so many things that. But turn 3 remembrance, spooky, very very spooky. Let's talk about the Grizzled Ranger. Well, this is was this like in your survey? I don't quite remember. How high up was this number 1 or like when it comes to followers?
It was number 1. Had a 4.61 rating.
Jesus.
Oh God.
Yeah, I mean that makes sense. Its power has been reduced from 4 to 3. And we're gonna have to like talk about the other change as well because it's relevant to discussion. And I'm super happy. I can't express how happy I am that this happened. And I'm gonna be honest. Like at first, I was open-minded. Because I remember like our first reaction regarding the Badger Bear. We were all like, this is not a real card. This is a token. And then it's like, wait, there's a little gem down there. This is a common card. They printed a 3-mana 4/4. Maybe okay. Yeah, maybe that's not as ridiculous as it seems. As we play on, weeks pass, like, yeah, this is pretty good. It reached a point, it's like, yeah, this is like, wow, this was a big mistake. This is a mistake. Like, why did this happen? And
got to the point where you would literally open a deck builder, and any deck that you were building Demacia with, you would scroll, okay, 3 Badger Bears, 3 Grizzled Rangers, 3 single combats, okay, we're good to go. Now let's build a deck. Like it was extremely auto-include.
It's ridiculous. Like a 3-mana 4, like it just had the resilience and the power to just like you just could not trade well into that thing. And obviously the Grizzled Ranger on top of that added like what I saw as a Curse Keeper on steroids, basically. Like this Curse Keeper that has 4 attack can block and attack twice. So yeah, I'm not surprised these cards were incredibly powerful and deemed so as well by the community. And both of them, it's only 1 stat, but 1 stat definitely goes a long way because if you think about it, the Loyal Badger Bear is only 1 stat difference between himself and the Lauren Bladekeeper, right? And Lauren Bladekeeper now has challenged you. When you may think, well, the difference between 23 attack is really relevant in Runeterra. Well, it is. When you take War Chef into account, like War Chef with Lauren Protege, all of a sudden you're kind of like mitigating that, and that now you actually have some decision making regarding deck building in Demacia. I feel. How do you guys feel about these changes? What do you guys think?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of these changes overall. I mean, do you guys remember there was this Reddit meme before the expansion came out? There was this Reddit meme where it said on top, it said what we kind of want / expect / hope the meta to be. and then it was like a bunch of all these new cards and Bilgewater stuff. And then on the bottom, it was what the meta will actually be. And it was just a bunch of Badger Bears and Grizzled Rangers. It's like,
it's so accurate.
right. It was really, really, really accurate. Oh God. Yeah, no, I mean, these needed to change. I'm very happy that they are getting changes. The big question is, how competitive will these cards be? Because I do very much agree with you, Mogwai, that I personally think that Laurent Protege will start fitting back in there, maybe instead of Badger Bear, kind of like as a flexible option. Ranger, I think, will still be good though.
Yeah, I agree. Like,
I mean, a 2-for-1 is just for 4 mana. Like the stats you get from that is just insane, and the fact it has Scout, so you have to answer it the turn it gets played. At the start of the expansion, when I was playing against Grizzled Ranger, I actually had to stop and think, you know, how do I trade with this? Like, what do I let it attack me? It was like so much value. You almost were like dumbfounded by, you know, the situation. Honestly, at the very beginning, I'm like, what is this? I mean, if I trade, I'm screwed.
Why is this legal?
Exactly.
But I mean, it is a huge difference. Like especially to a card like this that can attack twice, like a drop in 1 attack. Obviously, basic math implies that it's you know, you're going down from 8 to 6 damage. So that's and also it's relevant when you're trading, because it feels bad when you're trading into it with a 5 health unit and you're like left with a 1 health, and they still have their 4/4. Now at least you preserve a little bit more health. Overall, it's definitely gonna tone this guy down, but he's definitely I think he's close to auto include still in Demacia personally, but I could be wrong.
I mean, especially in Bannerman, because you really want to have sticky units that can flood the board and continue to you know, have a wide board for when Sithra comes down or when Bannerman comes down on turn 6 or 7. And this unit does that. I mean, you play it trades most of the time, and then you still have another unit to go. So you're still filling up the board. It's kind of the same thing. It's very resilient. That being said, with Badger Bear being nerfed to 3 attack, the 3-mana Badger Bear, it's obviously a big nerf, but it's still going to probably trade with 2 units. So because of the 4 health, I think the 4 health is still massive for a 3-mana drop. Yeah. So it's still going to be a good card, I think. Maybe not auto-include, but yeah, still a good card.
I think the biggest thing about Ranger that nobody talks about is the fact that there's not a lot of good 4-mana cards in Demacia, or honestly, almost the entire game. A big reason why Bannerman was so OP that nobody really talks about is because it was 4 mana, and like there's almost no good 4 mana cards in Runeterra. And now Ranger comes down, and it's not only just ridiculous, but it hits that 4 mana slot that you can even work with Bannerman, just because Bannerman often doesn't want to be played on turn 4, but you sometimes have to play it on turn 4. So yeah, just being like existing as that 4 mana card is still really powerful.
Yeah, that's super relevant, because this goes back to what we were talking about Cuerno Largo over here with the, you know, the 5-drop and how, you know, contested that slot is. But if you go if you look at the Grizzled Ranger, like, not only is it like arguably the best card in the game, but it has like no competition whatsoever.
Exactly.
So that just it all adds up for it to just like. And we really I think the tipping point when I just sat down, just slammed my fist on the table, just like, enough, this is ridiculous, is when we saw now, because we definitely expected these cards to be in Demacia Bannerman, right? But when we saw Karma Lux rise as, in my opinion, become like the best deck in the metagame, I think it's the most solid deck overall for ladder. It's just really good, and you see them running a full set of Badger Bear and Grizzled Rangers, just like, okay, this is just stupid, you know, like they're just that was the tipping point for me personally, and really happy to see these cards changed. And to mitigate for these Demacia nerfs, they're gonna buff a pretty forgotten 4-drop. You know, speaking of 4-drops in Demacia, the Laurent Chevalier, I believe is his name. He's the blonde guy, Epic. Used to be a 3/1 challenger that upon striking will give you a random challenger. Got buffed from 3/1 to 3/2. Now, the biggest question regarding this chain is it relevant in any sort of shape or form? Elaborate, guys.
You know, it is. I've always felt that this card was a bit underrated. Yeah. It does feel like I don't know. It kind of got a bit power creeped by the Rising Tides. Like I always kind of like sort of liked it in the base set. I don't know if this can quite be its day, but I'll actually maybe mess around with it. I think it's decent for sure.
I mean, if you buff it, it definitely has a lot of potential, and it's really important to note that the change from 1 health to 2 is just as relevant as the change from like 3 to 4. Like going from 1 health to 2 in Runeterra is super, super key. There's so many things all of a sudden that you survive. Vile Feast, Make It Rain, Spider Chump Blockers, Static Shock, and you could just go on and on, man. Withering Wail. Like the fact that it won't go down as easily, which will potentially allow you to set it up and then have it survive 1 turn and maybe buff it from that point onwards. Because a card like this, if you buff it, can just net you pretty crazy value, I think. So yeah, it could be. I'm not sure if it'll be competitively relevant, but yeah, it could be decent. What do you think, Panda?
I think Demacia overall kind of relies on very big bodies and a lot of stats, and this card for the mana cost doesn't really accomplish that. So that's a big reason of why it doesn't see play now. I think. I mean, every other card, it's kind of the thing with Demacia, right? Like their identity is just have really big stat lines and bodies, and this card goes against that in a way. So, but if there's a deck that has not so much a focus on just overflooding the board and all this, but a different focus altogether, then maybe it could find kind of a niche spot in that deck. But in like Bannerman, I don't think this card is going to see much play. For example,
I agree.
I sort of don't like this change actually.
Why?
I like the card, and I like the. I like the approach to try to get the card more viable, but I think when thinking about balance and design, it's kind of important to look at it through the framework of not like a card level analysis, but like a deck and meta level analysis. And it's like, nerfing or buffing certain cards to be equalized might be unhealthy in the grand scheme of things. And in this case, like, this card just represents an expedition card, and like I don't think it's really going to be any better to play in constructed. Like you still will basically see nobody play this in constructed, but it does like make Demacia just a tiny bit stronger to kind of like go down the path in expedition, and they're kind of already the expedition king.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm honestly like really like out of touch with like the expedition meta, so I didn't know. I mean, it makes sense that Demacia, with the Badger Bears, and such.
Grizzled Rangers.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense, right? But because you have to take card rarity into account for that format as well, right? But it definitely makes sense that it's the king there. So I didn't know that personally, but yeah, that's an interesting take. What were you gonna say?
I think that the like Swim said, like the minor stat, like 1 attack, 1 health up, or 1 attack up, or these minor like stat changes instead of like reworks or total changes for nerfs or buffs.
Yeah.
Like you said, you have to look at it situationally. Like this card is not going to see play because of this. Like, sure, okay, it's great. It's a bit better. It is. I mean, that's obvious, I think, but not enough to change its kind of situation in the game. I think too, it's kind of a more highlighted change than like Karma's, but Karma is kind of in the same thing where her buff to or her nerf to 6 mana is a change, yes, and it is a negative, of course. But I think it's not relevant enough in the way she's played and the situation she's played in to be like as big as it would be for other champions. If I don't know, Garen was changed to 6 mana, that's relevant. All of a sudden he's contesting Sithri on turn 6. You can't play in turn 5. That's a very relevant thing, even though it's 1 mana change. I think it's the same or the different case with Karma. Whereas in her situation, how she's played, normally turn 10, turn 9, it's a nerf, sure, but it's not as relevant situationally.
Yeah. Definitely agree. So we're gonna move on to a change that I've personally been asking for a long time, but quite the heavy nerf at the same time. I gotta admit that. Standalone, entereza in Spanish, went from 3 cost to 4 cost, but it remains the same amount of like stat buffs and everything. So yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and start by saying this, like, this card I believe is kind of, this may become like unplayable completely. Like it's just like you're paying 4 mana for +3/+3 stat line boost. I mean, it still has a pretty important requirement, and just not being able to play this on turn 3 with a 3-drop, that was basically the only situation in which this card really saw, like the only type of deck in which this card saw play to begin with. Like I said, I'm not saying I'm happy with this change because I think overall the patterns of the decks in which this card was played were overall unhealthy. Like Zed into standalone, especially from a new player perspective, that just feels really bad to go up against. A lot of times, you need to have an immediate way to deal with that. If not, you just automatically lose. And overall, I think that was very toxic. But maybe they could have taken a different approach and like increased the value. Like I would have been okay with the card being 4 mana and +4/+4. I don't know about you guys, but I think in this current version, I would be surprised if it sees much play. What do you guys feel about it?
Yeah, this card poo-poo. It's out. It's out.
Yeah.
Like, listen, nobody loves standalone more than me, but it's done. It's like you cannot survive this. Man.
Yeah,
I don't know.
agree with
Straight to the point.
With your stance, Mogwai. I think again, situationally on turn 3 was very strong because Fiora attacks on turn 3 with a challenger, and that's when you want to play Fiora because of how spell mana works, because you cannot play anything turn 1 and 2 and then have the 3 and 3 for a 3-drop and standalone. Like, it just, everything about this card screamed playing it on turn 3 and buffing up these very problematic turn 3 units that have a very strong impact if they're buffed, like Solitary Monk, like Zed, like Fiora, and making it turn 4 just ruins all of that. So it's, I think, like you said, at least keeping the flavor intact of 4 mana 4/4, 3 mana 3/3 would be at least some kind of saving grace. And some degenerate would find a way to make this strong, probably with some kind of turn 4 deck instead. But yeah, it is a big nerf, and I think it's hard. It's a hard card to nerf because if you change the mana to 4 like they've done now, it's almost unplayable basically in like a constructed deck.
I was actually pointing down, but I should have been pointing to the right. Like when he said, so somebody would figure out a way to make this toxic again. Because So's been a big fan of standalone degeneracy for sure. And
oh, I'm sorry.
No, what were you gonna say?
Oh, I was gonna say, what happened to Oso Tejan Leal?
Oso? Wait.
Did we miss Oso Tejan Leal?
No, that's the Loyal Badger.
Oh, okay. I was really confused. I was so confused that we skipped that one. But now, okay.
Panda's face.
That makes sense. That makes sense.
Also to John Leal, yeah. That's.
I was pretty close though.
Yeah, you were. Oso Tejon Leal.
Mogwai repeated your pronunciation. He did not pronounce it correctly. You were completely off. You could have been speaking some other language, and I would not know what you were talking about.
All right, let's talk about Retaguardia de la Legión, the Legion, the Legion rearguard. Where are we jumping into the sweet Noxus Piltover burn nerfs? There's only 2, but arguably they're going to be very, very relevant towards the archetype. I was actually talking about this one in particular with Panda right before the podcast, and he has some really strong opinions about it regarding its impact, right, on the deck. But basically, the Legion Rearguard got changed from 2 health to 1. It is now a 3/1, 1-drop that cannot block. So, what do you guys think?
Yeah, I mean, it makes more sense. Like, it was kind of always like a really, really strong concept. I think that in Runeterra, I think it's pretty clear that the devs don't want what we know from coming from other card games to be like a true aggro deck. Like, a lot of people, you remember when Runeterra launched and people were referring to like Fearsome or Hecarim as like aggro, just because there's no true aggro in Runeterra. If you come from MTG or Hearthstone, aggro is like just
mono red,
really fast. They will murder you. And Runeterra devs don't want that level of speed to exist. And honestly, I think I agree with that overall.
I agree.
I mean, there does need to be some fast pressure, but I like the way they've balanced it. I like the direction. This change speaks to that direction. It was kind of always OP because you didn't need to block anyway. So I like this change.
What do you think?
Yeah, I also like the change, but it's also a very, very big change. It might seem like, 3/1, but it affects literally almost every card in the deck because the way it plays out now, all your 1-drops are 1 health, so they're going to die to Thermo Beam. They're going to die to Vile Feast on turn 2. If you're attacking on turn 1, it's not as bad because a lot of decks don't have 1-drops, so you're going to get 3 damage, whatever, it's fine. But it affects turn 2 attacks because of Vile Feast, because of Make It Rain, because of Withering Whale at some point as well, because you can't use Demolitionists on it because it's one of the early drops that has a lot of health.
That's a very good
don't
point.
Find the Bunker Rookie. You kind of need health to expend to be able to get that burn damage through. You can't use the rear guard anymore to do that. Spiders block it now. I mean, Withering Whale kills it in 1. You can't transfuse with it in terms of like taking health from it to give it to someone else. I mean, a lot of cards are affected in a secondary, indirect way because of this nerf. So it's not just he got nerfed. He's still like a 3 attack. He's still gonna kill me. It's a big nerf. So and we'll see the second big nerf as well. It affects a lot, and I think it's definitely going to affect burn his play rate and win rate a lot in the next patch for sure.
It's not only like it's how vulnerable it is to all those removals that you listed, but also like the example with the Demolition is really key. Like a lot of times you're not gonna find your Crimson Disciple, and not only Demolitions, but it also can potentially even make your transfusions more awkward to play. It can also make your potential Noxian Fervor plays more disruptible as well. Like the deck, you don't notice it much at first, but it did definitely rely a lot on the thickness of the rear guard, and it's definitely the 1-drop that they were always hoping to get. It's the best one. Like turn 1 rear guard for burn is it ups the win rate by quite a bit, right? So very, very, very relevant change, and definitely will be a big hit to the deck. We're gonna be talking about a change that I don't think many of us expected, but one that I personally welcome quite a bit. Tabernero Borrachón, aka Bonachón, no Borrachón. The tavern, the friendly tavern keeper is his name, right? Went from 2 power to 3 power. So instead of a 3 mana 2/3, it's a 3 mana 3/3 that upon entry heals either an ally or your Nexus by 3. I really, really like this buff. I really like it. What do you guys think?
I think this is a very solid card. Like it's like the same as like Earthen Ring Farseer from Hearthstone. I think that it's kind of been like somewhat low-key underrated for a while. Yeah. I know that Prismat really popularized it in Freljord Ezreal. You brought it in the Fiora deck. Yeah. I think that it's been an underrated card, and this is a pretty notable buff. It actually really is. I think this card is definitely going to see some experimentation. I think the biggest problem with this card is that it's in Freljord.
Oh, let them have it. They need something. Like
I don't want to lie to them, Mogwai.
Guys, Freljord is a fine region.
Yeah, Freljord good, guys. Play Freljord.
I think the second biggest problem is that Burn is getting significantly nerfed this patch, so its play rate is going to go down a lot next patch. But if this were to happen without Burn getting any nerfs somehow in some parallel universe, no nerfs happen to any cards in Burn, Freljord would be a much stronger region overall for the meta, I think. Although it is a card that doesn't really synergize with any specific archetype, so when you're putting it in kind of as a tech card for Burn or for...
It depends, because if you have, like, for example, in my Fiora deck, like, I didn't just have it as a soft tech for Burn, I also had it to heal my Fiora after the buffs. Like, it had multiple uses. Like, the fact that this card can net you a lot of... It can have a very similar, like, effect to, for example, when you play a Chronicle Ruin for 4 mana to heal up a unit, right? Like, it can be pretty impactful. It's flexible, and I think we've seen how impactful a change from like either a power or a health buff up to 3 can lead to. I think a really good example is the Avarusan Trapper. It went from pretty much see no play. Obviously, it went with a bigger buff, right? But now, I think it's arguably one of the best 3-drops Freljord has to offer easily. Yeah, I mean, okay.
I agree, Mogwai. I agree.
Okay, I know it's not a big statement, right? But it's a good 3-drop. Like, if you compare with it, it's good. It's decent, okay? But, yeah, that's basically all we got to say about that. Big fan of the change. Definitely agree with both of you guys. And I think it will... It depends on the metagame, for sure. But it's playable. It's very much playable now. It was playable before, but now it's actually very competitive, and I like it. But this one is a very, very relevant change that I'm super happy happened. Even though it's kind of bittersweet, because I've been having a lot of fun with Twisted Fate in Ionia recently. And this is definitely a big blow to that deck and any sort of Ionia deck with which is spell based. That is Deep Meditation, going from 4 cost to 5 cost, which means, and this is confirmed by the way, that when the card is reduced by half, if you meet the requirements, it will still cost 3 mana instead of 2. So in both cases, you're going to have to be paying 1 more mana than you used to for playing this card. And this is a very, very relevant change. And I'm really interested to see like your guys' take on how this is going to affect the card's usage and overall. So how do you guys feel about Deep Meditation?
It's pretty huge. I think that there's a lot of people that might underrate this change's ability to impact this card's play rate. I think that there's a good chance this card stops being run in most, if not all, decks. We'll see. Wow. I mean, it's still a card, but it's a lot more clunky to use. There's a lot of Karma decks that were cutting it, like Ezreal Karma, that kind of style, where it was like cutting it a decent amount. I don't get me wrong. I'm not saying the card will be bad, but I'm just saying this change has a high chance of making it just so much more clunky.
No, and I see your perspective. Like, definitely, it's a big nerf. Like, just so people understand, like, there have been cards that were like the face of the metagame and just fell into absolute obscurity by just receiving a 1 mana like bump. Yeah. Like Rasa is the prime example of that, right? Like, people are like, Rasa, well, what is that? You know, Rasa used to be the card to play. You know, so this could definitely this could be huge. What do you think, Panda?
I think looking at it on paper and not understanding kind of its relevance with Ionia and with certain champions, I would consider a huge nerf and all this. But taking into account Karma still exists and the spell doubling still exists, and that it's very easy to get the 2 spell reduction of cost going, I think it will still see play. I think it does make things a bit more awkward with a lot of decks. Like Heimer Vi, for example, you can't play it turn 4 even without the cost reduction and just like get a really wide hand for your turn 5 Heimer play or Vi play, whatever. But overall, I think with how Karma works and how Karma still exists in the game and what it gives you in Ionia specifically, where you have, you really want to have this huge like reach in terms of card advantage and control in the late game, I think it's still going to see play. It might be cut from some lists, like Swim said, that aren't so late game heavy, but for the late game, I think what it does is still crazy, or it's still very, very valuable because you need that card advantage to win games as a control deck. And the cost reduction is still pretty easy to hit, I think.
Yep, we're gonna move on to the Boom Crew Rookie. This is a nerf that it's easy to say that we all definitely expected to happen, but the big question was not if this card was gonna be nerfed, but how. Right? There were 2 big theories as to potential nerfs to this card. The first one revolved around a potential like return to its old ways, because a lot of people don't know, but Boom Crew Rookie used to be as 2 mana 0/4. With the same ability and everything, and they decided to buff it in the pre-beta stage. But the other argument was to make it a 2 mana 1/3, reduces health. So basically a reduction in either the attack or the health stat by 1. I personally wanted to see the one that actually happened. I'm very happy that we saw this one. This is definitely the bigger nerf out of the 2 potential outcomes. And that is that Boom Crew Rookie is going down from 4 health to 3. It is a 2 mana 1/3 now, which is incredibly relevant. There are countless scenarios in which this guy survives at 4 health and will not be able to do so at 3, and it gets off 2 attacks on the opponent, which translates at the very least into 4 damage to the Nexus, in case he gets blocked. But sometimes your opponent can't afford to block him because you have other attackers with 3 attack, right? So we all know how it is when you face burn, right? Massive nerf. Big hit for the burn archetype for sure, and I welcome it. How do you guys feel about it?
Yeah, pretty much everything in those early turns, like turn 2, turn 3, has either 2 or 3 attack. So like if it had 2 health, it would always die in 1 hit. If it had 4, it would always survive 1 hit and always get the second attack off. As it is at 3, it's it's got a chance of surviving and hitting a second time, but it's just at a chance. Like this is a pretty massive nerf. This combined with rear guard those being the two nerfs to Burn in this update. I think they'll set nerf back a ways. I don't think it's an over nerf. I know that there's a lot of people that will always say like, well, every time you suggest something should be nerfed, there's always a lot of people that say, well, it keeps the meta in check, right? Like you say Deny should be nerfed, and they're like, well, Deny at 3 meta keeps the harrowing in check. Or like Burn should be nerfed. Well, there's always gonna be a strong deck. If you nerf Burn, then Control will just be OP. I mean, it's like, yeah, there will the aggro does need to exist to a degree, but Burn has been very, very oppressive for a while. I think these two changes are exactly in line. I don't think they're an overstep. I love them.
I think we saw at the beginning when the closed beta, when Runeterra released officially, well, not officially, but in closed beta, the general speed of the game, I think, was maybe because people didn't know how to abuse certain things, like the very late game, like Karma stuff and the early game Burn stuff. It was very like tightened to the mid game, and it made matchups a lot less binary, and it made it like you can kind of the typical like argument of the beatdown and like who's going, who's the control deck, who's the aggro deck. You could always, like, the games felt kind of where you could win, if you played well. But Burn and Karma, I think, stretch that out on either side, and I think that makes a lot of matchups feel really bad, and it makes things more binary in general and just bad to play against, right? I think the more you kind of tighten that up, where Burn is not as aggressive and not as good at doing what it does, and Karma, likewise, I'm still gonna defend. I think Karma needs a bigger nerf. Isn't as oppressive in the late game. The more you tighten that up, the better it's gonna be for the game, I think, overall, because it makes matchups less binary and makes the game, I think, a bit more fair.
Aggro decks are necessary for any card game to have a healthy metagame, and Runeterra is certainly not an exception. But I want aggro decks to kill me by actually connecting an attack on me. Thank you. Like when I can't even count the amount of times I've lost this damn deck without even receiving like an actual hit from a unit onto my Nexus, and that's just ridiculous. So really happy to see this, and honestly, normally I'm very like toned down when it comes to changes and nerfs, and I'm always behind the idea of being responsible and not completely obliterating archetypes and everything. But when it comes to Burn, I hope it just burns and crashes and ceases to exist altogether. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that there will be some aggro deck that stabilizes at like probably low tier 2, but tier 2 nonetheless, like competitive tiering. Like it'll probably have like a 54, 56%.
People think when people think, sorry to interrupt, but when people think about like tiers and you say like a tier 2 deck, they think, oh, that's like the meme shit deck thing. It's the meme. It's like no, tier 2 is like legit competitive. Like you can take a tier 2 deck to a tournament and win with it. It's just it's like the thing about it. It's not tier 1 because it has perhaps more weaknesses all across regarding the specific metagame. But a tier 2 deck is a good deck, and it's gonna have like a 3% less win rate than a tier 1 deck. Like you're exactly right. I say this all the time. And
these nerfs are big, but there are still decks that have no way to heal and Burn. I mean, sure, Boom Crew got nerfed and Rearguard, sure, but it still has a lot of Burn options, like Mogwai said, where you don't need to connect face, and you can just the first 2 turns with the damage you can in, and then after that just burn your opponent down, and that's still going to be very relevant. There's a lot of decks that still have no way of dealing with that.
Exactly.
Outside of like Ionia, Shadow Isles, and I guess Freljord now maybe with Tavern Keeper. So Burn is still going to get a lot of wins that are going to feel bad. I mean, even if these things got nerfed, it's still going to be a very viable deck for Swimstrim.
So we're gonna move away from Burn here to talk about the last few cards on this list. We're gonna cover the Brood Awakening nerf as it went from 5 to 6 cost. So basically reverted, quite simply, because this is a balance change that happened not too long ago, I believe. And I am personally conflicted about this because for a long time, I believe this card should potentially be nerfed again because it was a little bit too universal, especially because of how when it started to see a lot of play in like arena control decks and such. But at the same time, I will admit that this may just like there's a reason why this card was changed to begin with, right? So I just don't know. Like kind of wish this card could cost 5.5, I guess. But yeah, it's weird for me. I think you Swim have more of like a direct view on this. Like you, but what do you think about this change?
Yeah, I mean, I would say I'm very much in agreement with you that this is like one of the more conflicting ones. I would say that if I had to pick a side, I tend to be kind of skeptical of this. Shadow Isles is somewhat getting nerfed with, Burn going away. That's a large position where, okay, so Shadow Isles, when the game first launched, it was just OP. You used it with everything. It was just great. And then after they double nerfed it, for the back end of the base set, it was relegated to just a control region. We kind of only play it in control, but it was not only a control region, it was the control region. The identity of control didn't really exist outside of Shadow Isles. But now that they've given more tools to PNZ and Ionia, it feels like they feel sort of lost in the meta until Burn existed, and then their identity was entirely caught up in just killing Burn, basically. And I feel like now, with those other things having tools and Brood Awakening getting a bit nerfed, it does actually feel like Shadow Isles is kind of losing that position. Like, it nerfs Endur decks pretty significantly, and Endur was fine. It nerfs, like, Karina decks. And yeah, Karina was a little strong, but I feel like there were better, like, targets there, like, and they're already hitting Vi. I tend to be a little skeptical of this, but we'll see.
Yeah, if I had to,
you guys' ear off.
If I had to pick between it getting nerfed or staying the same, I would have probably picked staying the same. I think it wasn't a problematic card. Like, it wasn't considered. I think no one, really complained about it. It wasn't like it was good, sure. And maybe it did the whole, playing outside of a spider's archetype a bit too well. Like, it was a very versatile card, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but it was just thrown into a lot of decks, like some control decks that needed to have board presence that could kind of not really play for the spider payoff, but more just for the three bodies, being aggro when you need to be aggro and being defensive when you need to be defensive. It could do both, kind of. So it was just a good, strong card that had its kind of identity with Shadow Isles and the spider archetype. And I don't think it's a bad thing. I think it wasn't overpowered, and I think it wasn't necessarily a problem. But yeah, maybe they didn't like it being so versatile, and they wanted it to be more kind of a spider-themed thing, like card now. But it's not really that good at doing that because it's kind of an awkward finisher because it's susceptible to so many things like Withering Wail and 1 damage pings and everything. So it's in an awkward spot at 6 mana, to be honest. I think it's not going to be. It might still see play, but it's definitely worse.
I think it may very well be the case that this card would never be able to take that synergistic specific role. I think if this card ever becomes viable, it's going to be so as a more universal tool that happens to work out well with Elise and, like, for example, the Karina control deck, but it's just going to be very flexible nonetheless. So, like I said, I'm very, very conflicted. Like a few weeks back, I would have definitely advocated for this. Especially because of how prevalent. But now we've seen Karina control definitely die down from the metagame. Like it's dropped down in usage significantly, at least through my own experience. And I believe maybe Karma Lux may be attributed to that. So yeah, it's just one of those things. I completely understand the reasoning behind this, but ultimately maybe it just wasn't necessary. But it's not an easy, like it's really, it's just like sitting there, right, in between. But yeah, it's definitely yeah.
This is probably the first change that I disagree with in any sort of notable way. It's like I was saying I kind of disagreed with Chevalier, but that doesn't really matter. It's like it's kind of a very relevant card. I think if I had to guess, this is the first change we've seen so far that might have a negative impact on the meta.
One thing that we haven't mentioned yet, it is a nerf to Elise. And Elise is a champion that has seen a lot of play all throughout. She's not overpowered. She's never been considered
but she's always in the top.
But she's always been like top 6, top 7 champions, like very good. Yeah. You put her into a lot of Shadow Isles decks. So that is a relevant point where it is nerfing her level up. And I think it's not a bad thing. I think Elise is a very strong champion. Yeah. Again, not overtuned, not super oppressive, but definitely a bit stronger than what she should be, I think. And this is maybe a way to indirectly nerf her as well.
Yep. All right, we're going to move on to a pretty interesting change, which I personally really, really like. Dientes Largos, who I think that means long tooth, is the name of the shark, I assume. That's the literal translation. goes up from a 5/1, a 4-mana 5/1 with Overwhelm that is generated through the spell, the 4-mana spell, to a 5/2. And I love this change. I think this change was necessary. I think in the current stage of Legends of Runeterra, we've mentioned this before. The difference between 1 health and 2 health is absolutely massive. And not having a unit that you're generating for 4 mana immediately die to make it rain or Vile Feast or, Twisted Fate, red card, etc., is super relevant. And it's not necessarily going to make the card competitive, but it makes Fizz a little bit better, I guess. And the way it makes Fizz better is actually good, right? Because it's not like it's enhancing Fizz's ability to disrupt removal gear towards him, but more so the cheeky card that you get after you level him up, and it's nice. I like it. Not super impactful for the meta or anything, but it's definitely a good change, basically.
Yeah, pretty much just that. I mean, you're not going to play this card still, but it's a buff to Fizz, and hey, it's a buff to Fizz that kind of like, it's kind of the only buff to Fizz they could have done without making him toxic.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, no, it makes sense. I'm fine with it.
Yeah, I think it's a perfect example of we talk about like the very minor stat changes that it's not going to make anything impressive. It's just a little minor thing where they see like the certain play rate or win rate for the champion, and maybe they think, okay, I have to boost this up a tiny bit for it to go into like the balanced area that we want champions or regions to be in. And like Swim said, you can't, it's being a 1-drop and having the stats that Fizz has, it's very hard to balance him without, if you put him to 3/1, he's all of a sudden a problem, or 2/2,
Yeah.
So this is like a minor buff that they're going to change. They're going to see how it affects the meta. It won't be anything super impactful, but hey, it's a little minor thing that you can add. And it's like Hecarim, I think. That attack power is also going to be not super huge, but might be enough to put him into a bit of a better spot.
Yeah, for sure.
One interesting thing in the direction you're saying, Panda, because one of the things in game design is you want to open yourself up to a lot of dials so that you can more functionally and more precisely get the balance you want. I would like to see them deviate from the champ level +1/+1 formula a little more often. We currently have I think 4 cases in the game where
few
champs
exceptions.
Yeah, there's Elise gets to attack, Darius gets the attack instead of the health, Tryndamere. There's 4 champions in the game where they don't just get +1/+1, they get a different stat line. I think it'd be very interesting if they did that more often and would give them more ways of balancing things.
Completely agree. I
more precise,
I also, I love exceptions. Not only to the +1/+1, but also, for example, another exception is Katarina. Obviously, in her case, is for a balance perspective, right? But still, she's the one champion that goes up in cost from 3 to 4 when she levels up. Yeah. Which is obviously, but yeah, I completely agree. I love when I see exceptions like you mentioned Darius and the others, and there should be more, and hopefully they look to that in future set design. And the last 2 cards that we're going to be talking about, I'm actually really excited because I'm going to be trying these 2 out quite a bit. But very, very, very hyped for these 2. First of all, the Monkey Idol went from 4 health to 5 health. This is a significant buff to the card because now it has the potential to generate 3 monkeys in total. 3 monkeys from 2 to 3. OP tier 1. That's all I gotta say. What do you guys feel about this?
I think I love the fact that this has an odd number of triggers in this case. I think it's really cool because what it means is if you want to play this as an offensive card or a defensive card, you'll have to plan ahead because it'll summon 3 monkeys. So it'll summon 2 monkeys of the alignment of whichever turn you're on. So if you put on offense, you get 2 offense monkeys and 1 defense monkeys. I think that's really cool.
And it makes it more interactable. It gives the opponent more reason to interact with it, right? Because if you take that 1 health off, then it loses a lot of value, not just 1 health, basically. It's like a whole extra trigger.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
What do you guys think of its viability? Because it's always been kind of close. I mean, not really, but kind of sort of close.
I'm like the first thing that I want to try with this card. A viewer of mine actually sent me a really cool deck idea that I want a concept that I really want to explore, and it's Monkey Idol with Shadow Owls and Thresh. This card actually technically triggers a bunch of. Obviously, it takes a while. But you know, like I saw this cool deck with like Thresh and Gangplank, and I don't know, like it can be. It's definitely a very neat like it helps you level up the likes of Gangplank and Sejuani easier, right? And it's a fun card. I'm not gonna lie, I have yet to actually play Monkey Idol, so I don't even know what its current power level. I know it's not high, but I don't even know how bad of a card it is right now. But this current version, like I'm excited to try it out. I think it could have potential. Like
I'm gonna. Oh god!
I think it's safe to say that if Mogwai hasn't played Monkey Idol, I haven't played Monkey Idol. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna let Mogwai spend 2 hours on his stream testing a Monkey Idol Thresh deck, and then I will form my own opinions on it and decide if I should play it or not. But probably not.
I have to get my hands dirty.
In the vein of Thresh, you can also do Dawn Speakers with Monkey Idol as well. And the Dawn Speakers also buffs the Idol, which keeps it alive longer because it gives it 1 health every time. And since you're in Demacia, if you put Chain Vest on the Monkey Idol, it will lower its damage on itself. That's hilarious. So it deals 1 to itself every time, and then Dawn Speaker gives it that 1 back every turn, so it
never
becomes
dies.
Immortal.
That's hilarious. That's actually really funny. Okay, that's a neat idea. I like it. All right. So okay, several ideas to explore with this card. Definitely very excited about it. And this one, the next one we're going to talk about, the final card we're going to mention here, the Slot Bot. I'm not going to lie. My initial impression wasn't all too great, but the more I think about this, the more I think this 3-drop match should be really, really strong now. Like going from 0-3 to 1-4 with an effect that basically allows it to gain stats every turn, minimum 1, and obviously more if you're drawing. Like, this card could be legit. This 3-drop could be legit. What do you guys think?
No, it actually could. This is a little, like, I don't want to say scary, but it actually, like, this could be the future of just, like, Twisted Fate stuff. Like, I'm looking at this and I'm like, this is definitely the first deck I'm going to play in the expansion. Probably, I'm guessing the first deck you might play too. Yeah. I don't know. It's just like, I think that this card wasn't that far off. Like, okay, it was, but it wasn't like as far off as people think. Maybe, like 2 stats are crazy.
Yeah. Especially like on a card like this, and it's got the stat line of Dawn Speakers, which is important to point out because especially like early on in the beta, like we all have experience playing a lot against Dawn Speakers. Dawn Spiders are a very popular deck, and we could realize how difficult it was hard to kill the Dawn Speakers. Like the 4 health. Like keep in mind that he shuffles his stats, right? So he could very easily end up with like all of a sudden on the next turn have a total of like 6 stats and just end up like 5-1 and it just dies, right? Like it can happen, but for the most part, like it's gonna be really much more resilient and just it's very relevant, really relevant. Like 2 stats on this guy go a long way, and if he sticks around for like more than a couple of turns, he becomes a monster. Like I've played a lot of Slotbot, I've suffered a lot with Slotbot, but at the same time, most of the time, like the card would just fail me because of that initial 3 health, and it just die into like a Noxian Fervor or whatever, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So it's super relevant. This is really, really big, in my opinion.
You mentioned the Dawn Speakers kind of in closed beta, the early times of Runeterra being like a very resilient unit at 1-4 for 3 mana. So it's good that there isn't like a 1-4 for 2 mana in the game that had a really strong ability, like burning down your Nexus. You know, that would be really bad. Just to put that into perspective for you for a second. You know, a little flashback to what we were just living through this past month. But yeah, I agree. I think Slotbot. Also, the fact that it has the same build around as something like Twisted Fate, which is a champion you want to be building around in Bilgewater, and I think it's a champion that has a lot of potential still, that still hasn't found kind of the optimal deck and champion combo and color combo even to be in. And I think Slotbot might help maybe find that identity and find that very optimal Twisted Fate, like draw heavy build around deck, with and also having like a nice mid game unit that has stats because of that same drawing card game plan.
Yeah, really hyped for this one. Really excited. And yeah, so like you're right. Like this is definitely one of the first decks that I'm gonna be messing around with. I love the Slotbot. I think it has some of the best voice lines as well. It has a lot of voice lines, by the way. Like I think it has like a voice line with every single like robot sort of card in the game. Yeah, it has like Plaza Guardian, the Flame Chompers. It has like different interaction with each one, which is really cool. And I love it. And Twisted Fate, you know, I never get enough of him, so this is gonna be some fun times. Hey, Slotbot and Monkey Idol. I definitely will be trying Monkey Idol too. Just really, really cool for them to buff these cards. They seem incredibly fun. They have very unique, quirky designs, and it's gonna be some good fun times. So that does it for the balance patch. As expected, this took a while. But you know, we still.
But we're not done yet because there's the watch list cards.
Oh yeah, of course.
We haven't talked about them.
Oh yeah, and this one, it's very important for us to talk about this one in particular. By the way, the Undying Spirit. It's on their watch list. I think at this point, I could be wrong, but I think we could all agree that this card is becoming potentially highly problematic for the game, and. Yeah, I think it's going to have to be redesigned, actually, personally. How do you guys feel about Undying Spirit? I think as time passed, especially like in a tournament environment, it's very dangerous. I don't know. The more I see this card, the more I dislike it. What do you guys think?
Yeah, it does feel like it depends like where you draw the line with like a redesign or a nerf. Like for example, if you were to move it to fast speed, would that be like a redesign or a nerf, you know? I feel like I tend to agree. In game design, there's this concept where basically it does need to change if people aren't happy, right? Mm-hmm. Now, what the solution is, well, that's the problem, is figuring out what the actual solution is. But if it's making people unhappy, then it's something that should change.
It's not a card as like statistically you can say it has like a really high win rate, so it's very oppressive and it's very overtuned. It's more a card that sometimes don't reach that mana on ladder, for example. You're playing against a lot of decks. It's not relevant sometimes. But when you do reach that mana and when it does have an effect on the game, the player that's playing against that remembers it very vividly, and it's a very feels bad moment. So even though the win rate might not say, hey, it's the best card in Demacia, it has the highest win rate whenever it's played or drawn or whatever, it's still a card that's unfun. And yeah, like Swim said, it's more of a fun factor and more of like how the opponent feels playing against it than a power level factor. And I think it is, problematic at the moment. I saw yesterday, BBG was playing this Jam Fest tournament. He was playing against Christmas time, and they were playing a mirror. And BBG had 2 units with Unyielding Spear on the board. One of them was Fiora. His opponent had 2 units with Unyielding Spear on the board. One of them was Fiora. And both players continued passing until one player found a detain. And he played it first, and he lost. And BBG won because he found the detain second. He was able to detain the detain unit. And overall, it was just like a clear-cut example of what this card is failing at doing, right? It's warping the game in a way that it shouldn't be warped, and it's making the game feel not like Runeterra. It's making it feel like a secondary minigame that's not what people are wanting to play. They don't want to play.
That match sounds like the pinnacle of Legends of Runeterra gameplay right there. Jesus Christ. For me, like at first it was more of like I solely focus on like the new player experience and the fun factor. But for me, it has transcended that. I think this card is just like disgusting, honestly. It feels really bad when your opponent plays it onto like a Lux, for example. And if you're not playing Ionia, you actually cannot, there's not a single card you could draw or potentially even tech in your deck to deal with that. Because if you're playing Shadow Owls, you're playing Nautilus, you have a couple of ways you can potentially deal with it. But you can, there are extremely limited options of interaction with it, and especially if it's applied onto a champion, because Purify can target that. And it just feels really, really, really bad to know that there's absolutely nothing you can do from that point onwards. And the fact that can happen at burst speed, there's no way that card does not get, at the very least, nerfed. But I would personally like to see a redesign. Redesign into what? I don't know. It's hard. Right? Like, it has to do something related to what it's implying, but it's tough, man. Like, you have to really think about, okay, how can we make this card not only like do something similar, but also be competitively, relevant as well and viable and all that. And but it needs to change. Like, I feel really strongly against it.
Mogwai, when I was saying it could be fast speed, you had this look like you were gonna say something.
I
Like,
no,
what would you think about that?
I just well, first of all, you have to reduce obviously you have to reduce the cost significantly, and second of all, I'm not sure if that ultimately solves the core issue with the card, right? Because then the problem turns into, okay, you need to have an immediate answer for that card, otherwise the same thing happens. Like the problem is like once that card resolves, the game is over, and it's kind of like it's worse than Karma on turn 10 in a way, it's just really, 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 like, it's important to have strong late game cards that could potentially end the game in any card game, but not to that degree, I feel. And I just don't think that a change to the speed of the spell would ultimately change the problem with it.
Yeah, it makes it to, I mean, it's a solution, but it continues into the same loop of being a binary solution, where if you don't have the answer, then it's the same thing. Like, or if you do have the answer, then it feels about to play as a player playing Unyielding Spirit. So it continues to be like the same game of like, well, if you don't have the answer, you're fucked.
I'm not implying that like it's not just like, okay, my deck should be able to answer any sort of like strategy early or later on. That's just obviously not, right? And there are some plays that are just gonna downright win you the game, but that card does so universally. If you're not playing Ionia, that I just feel that it's so toxic, and it's just not a good, like, I just don't think it was a smart design, and I think they should move away from making cards like that in the future, personally. So yeah, that's that. We have the merchant and the pilfered goods shenanigans, and then we have like direct damage, the whole burn stuff that they're keeping in track, and karma is real as well to discuss. So we can go over these. I think the merchant and the pilfered goods, the drawing from your opponent's deck mechanic is more of a frustrating sort of problem more than anything else. It's not really a balance issue. I don't think many people really implied it was. Well, some people do. I think it's OP, but it really, at the end of the day, when you're drawing cards from your opponent's deck, you're most of the time you're going to be drawing cards that don't really synergize well with what you're doing. And if you're drawing away from a deck that has like some actual highly synergy components, a lot of times you're going to draw cards that are not really going to net you good value on their own, and it's still like a strong tactic because I love running it, in Bilgewater themed decks like Twisted Fate. It gives you extra cheap card draw, right, to potentially go for the level up amongst other things, and there's a lot of very neat value that you get from that. Like it's not bad. It's definitely like a solid strategy because of the pure value it nets you, but I don't think it's anywhere near close broken. The big problem though lies in frustration. People, like, we've all gotten really pissed off when like we're going against one of these decks and they steal like the one-off of like, I don't know, when they steal like my one Noxian Guillotine in my deck and they use it against me. I don't know, shit like that can be really frustrating. And I think that's how do you guys feel? Like, what do you guys feel is like the current overall community perception of this mechanic, and do you think it warrants a change because of how people see it?
Yeah, I don't think it's too bad. I tend to like these cards overall, but I wouldn't mind a tweak. There's this clip of me out there where I play a black market merchant. Well, I trigger plunder, and then I play a second black market merchant, and that draws me the opponent's pilfered goods. And then I play that for 0 mana, and I draw his black market merchant off of that. And I do this, I chain like out of my mind. And I'm literally out of my chair laughing. And, that kind of like, it's kind of funny when that happens. I don't think that sort of thing should be impossible per se, but you could adjust the ceiling. I think Black Market Merchant probably doesn't need to have the cost reduction clause. They could keep both cards the same, but maybe remove like the cost reduction on Merchant.
I think it's funny the way you worded that question. Malcolm, you asked what we think might be the perception of the community about the card. And I could literally tell you because I did a survey about it. So it was 4th in the ratings. It was the 4th most problematic card, Pilfered Goods. It was a 4.16 rating, so it falls above 4, which is generally considered
that's high.
A card that has to be nerfed.
That's high.
Yeah.
And
higher than I thought.
Black Market Merchant was 3.88. So also in the top 10 and also like in Watchlist to nerf territory. And both cards are on Watchlist. So
which is funny because now, like, arguably, like, a lot of people may not realize that merchant is the more, I think.
Well, you can kind of interact.
Yeah.
You can interact with merging because he's a body on the board, right? So it's.
I guess.
I think my take on. I mean, I've been playing a lot of Deep this past month, so obviously my perception of the card might not be that bad because
it helps you out. Yeah.
I'm like, yeah, go ahead. Keep drawing cards, baby.
Make me go deep. Thank you.
So overall, maybe I'm like living in a parallel world. Like, this card sucks. Why is everyone complaining? But I do think like you said, it's a feels bad card. But I do think it's also a card that it's a very core part of Bilgewater, and it's a very core part of the identity. And I think it's similar to cards like Wild Feast, like Single Combat. Like Glimpse Beyond to some extent, where it's a card that it's hard to nerf because it's 2 mana, so like changing the values it makes it difficult, and it's also a card that it's kind of a reason to play Bilgewater, right? Yeah. If this card gets nerfed, then what are you doing with what's the identity?
Right. Exactly. I was gonna say,
and also like you cannot deny the fun component of it, and not only playing but also watching. I'm not gonna lie. Like, I get really pissed and I go on certain rants sometimes when I just feel like I got Hearthstoned out of the game because it just drew all of my relevant stuff. But at the same time, I could very well be like that for like a few minutes, end my stream, and then watch somebody else's streams and then have a streamer get completely obliterated by that and just completely laugh my brains off. Like it's one of those things that it's really funny to see. It's entertaining, and I think it's okay. I think ultimately it's okay. It's just the right dose of poison, I guess, but it's fine. It's not lethal. It's okay.
Right. I completely agree. I'm actually really surprised that it was ranked so high on like the Reddit poll because
I think it's more of a like unfun thing. I think the fix that you could do
it's a matter of perspective because it is incredibly fun for the guy doing it. Like there's no denying that. It is it's insane.
Unyielding is probably similar, right? You're playing Unyielding on your floor. I'm the boss now. Mess with me now. But I think a few possible changes that necessarily don't have to deal with changing its mana cost, because it would be a big jump changing it to 3 mana, would be 1, not pulling from the top of the deck. So either random still nerfs it to the extent where you could be pulling near to the top, so champion draws are more likely. So it's super minor nerf, but it helps out Freljord, obviously, massively, or from the bottom, even if you want to word it that way. And also revealing the card that you steal as like a face-up card in your hand, so your opponent knows what to play around. It's not a direct mana nerf, but it's a big information nerf, and it would make it not as bad to play against, because you know what you have to deal with, you know exactly what card was stolen, you know what card you still have in your deck, and you know what you're not missing, for example, in terms of like win condition, like Atrocity or Ledros or whatever. So those are two things that you're not changing the actual effect of the card, but you're changing the information and the situation around it and how the opponent perceives, its relation in the game. So I think those changes could go through, and they wouldn't necessarily make the card unplayable, but they would fix some of the feels bad moments.
I think it's really interesting that you bring that up, because it's actually, I mean, it's weaker because it takes from the top. I think a lot of people feel the opposite. A, psychologically, just because when they see a card played against them, they're like, well, I was about to draw that card. And B, which is just pure psychology. That's not, it doesn't end up making a difference. But B, Freljord players who might have like just buffed one of their own cards, and then this can draw that. Mm-hmm. It's very interesting. I do think it ends up being too hard of a counter to Freljord. Yeah. I think that much is true. Period. Yeah. Like I don't, and I have a viewpoint of like meta balance and design that I don't like certain things being balanced around other things, and like, just balance it by adding a counter, that kind of thing. I hate that logic in general. There are some exceptions. Yeah. I don't think it's just too swingy of an interaction. When you Omen Hawk and I steal one of your buffed cards, that's a gigantic swing. It's enormous. I'm taking your +1/+1 and I'm giving it to me. So that's definitely probably not okay. But it's also like doubling or tripling your champion odds, because those cards can't draw champions, but they draw from the top. So against any normal situation, my odds of drawing a champion go from like 10 to 15% to like 30 to 35 just off the top, which is interesting.
That's actually a very good point. That's super, like, and that's something that I definitely think about a lot when I'm facing one of those decks and they're like drawing out of my deck a lot. It's like, I'm gonna draw like a champion anytime now. Like I have to. Like they've taken all the other stuff out of there. That's definitely very, very key.
I think, yeah, having them drop from the bottom or something like that would be nice. I wouldn't mind it if they added like 1 mana to either card. That would be okay too.
Yeah, I agree. So
depends on the mana cost. I think it's the same. It's the same as Glimpse, where adding 1 mana isn't that big of a deal because it's not a card you're playing for tempo. So it's not a card you're playing on turn 2. So the difference between 2 and 3 mana for Glimpse or for Pilfered Goods isn't that massive because it's not a unit and you're not playing it for tempo. You're playing it for card advantage and kind of
it's definitely always going to be relevant because a lot of times you're, you know, like that 1 mana makes a difference between being able to go for a line of play or not. But ultimately, it's not as backbreaking as other potential nerfs. Like, for example, I think it's on a different level compared to a very similar card in Deep Meditation because of the way those decks function. But regardless, I think we tackled this one enough. We're gonna move over to they have a bit of a talk about Burn here. Just talking about the mechanics and thematics of Rising Tides as an expansion and how. You know, I've voiced my opinion very vocally about this for quite a while, like about how there's like too much direct damage available in the current card pool, and none of it is particularly broken, except for the likes of Boom Kuroki. But the sum of them all led to the rise of this archetype that just basically vomited damage to the face. And it's nice to see them acknowledging this. Here I have to like translate off the top of my mind when I read this because it's in Spanish, but here they say that they're going to continue to supervise this issue and that the best way to fix it is through the design of upcoming expansions. I think that's definitely the way to go. Like, there's quite a bit of direct damage going on. Well, first of all, let's start by nerfing some key components of the archetype, which will definitely make the deck take a big hit, and a lot of us have suspected that it will, like we spoke today, drop from a tier 1 status potentially. But moving onwards, to make sure that this doesn't happen again, they can add in some cool mechanics to kind of like counter this sort of like direct damage, basic strategy, right? There's a lot of neat things they can do in the future. Like there's some really cool ideas running around, like even though some of them are scary, like giving the Nexus armor or tough, but there's some cool, there's a design space open for this, right? And I'm excited to see that they're going to take that into account as they move onwards, designing new sets, and it's just good to see.
I agree.
Cool story, bro. And we're gonna go. Last but not least, is just Karma and Ezreal. Basically, they're aware of this, but their reasoning is that Panda mentioned this earlier, that with Ezreal's play rate going down a little bit, his win rate going down a little bit, and Karma being the big factor out of the two, they're gonna monitor like Karma a little bit and see if this change will be impactful, which we all said it probably won't be, and go on from there. And they're gonna leave Ezreal alone for the time being. And yeah, I like the focus going on Karma. Karma is definitely the issue here, and it's nice to know that even though they changed Karma, they still have in mind that it may not be enough, right? And it's nice to see. Like I really like to see these, like at the end of these balance patches, like these. I really like this portion of like the el punto de mira. I don't know how you say this in English. Watchlist. Watchlist. Yeah, on the watch. I like their reasoning. I like how they explain the reasoning behind every change, and I like how they mention stuff that hasn't changed, but they it's reassuring. It's like, hey, we know it's a problem. We're gonna monitor it. We're gonna see how things progress, and if we have to, we will deal with it. And it's very reassuring to see this.
I agree.
I agree. No, seriously, like it's really nice. Like, we've all played kind of, the same trajectory of games generally.
Yeah.
We've played a lot of games in the past. It's something that more devs should just do.
Yeah.
Like, especially, with Artifact, which was the polar opposite for the 2 months that game was a thing, which is just the devs' really major lack of communication. And, they're relaunching Artifact and they have a different team. I think they're communicating more this time around.
Yeah,
just like
definitely.
Full Stonewall compared to like, the current Runeterra team, which is just like, they're very open. They're like, yeah, we recognize these are problems. and there's a good chance that pretty much everything on the watch list. Has there been something on the watch list that hasn't gotten nerfed like 1 or 2 patches later?
I don't think so. In some shape or form. Like sometimes it's been like very broad things like mechanics, like for example, fearsome. Which they ended up tackling, with like the Frenzy Skitter and the nerf to the Wraithcaller.
Exactly.
Generally speaking, they always get to these things in one way or another, which is it's great. I overall, I gotta say this, and this is not just me. Like this is legit my view. I think they've definitely done a great job. Generally, these balance patches. I was looking to the side. What happened? What happened?
Nothing.
Panda has something to say.
Okay.
There's one card. There's one card that was on a watch list.
Okay.
And
it
didn't get
changed.
Ezreal?
And it's a very sneaky card. Very sneaky. I'm pretty sure this is the case. Maybe I'm wrong. Because I stopped playing for a bit in closed beta, but I'm pretty sure it didn't get any change. Very, very sneaky card. Very, very. What's the synonym for sneaky?
Elusive? Shadow Assassin?
Shadow
Assassin. Okay.
Okay.
I think.
I like it.
Yeah, no, and you're right, but I do think Shadow Assassin has lost her staple status a little bit with this expansion. Like she used to be like you could not build an Ionia deck without Shadow Assassin. That was just blasphemy. Now it's
Karma Ezreal decks are straight up cutting her.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah. Like
I think a big part of that, I was talking to Mogwai as well, not recently, but in the past, is that this expansion has brought a lot more card draw to the game.
Yeah.
With Pilfered Goods, and even I was seeing some lists at the beginning of the expansion running Progress Day, and I was just laughing. Like, what are you doing paying 8 mana for
rip the podcast title?
Yeah. So, but yeah, things like the meditation, Pilfered Goods, etc.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot more card draw in general, so Shadow Assassin feels a bit.
I suffered a lot trying to make, because I had this really fun deck before Rising Tides, Bad Trip Teemo, which used Teemo with Shadow Owls, and man, I tried it again the other day, and I learned the hard way just how bad Progress Day is now, dude. It's ridiculous. It's just like it's just so outclassed, even by salvage. God, for crying out loud. It's nuts.
There's a lot
man.
more card draw.
It's nuts.
Even cards like Jaw Hunter that aren't necessarily card draw, but they are like card advantage in a way. I mean, just it was added in every region basically. I noticed the other day, and it makes obviously cards that already existed that felt kind of oppressive go back to being balanced, and cards that weren't oppressive go down to being kind of bad.
But I love it though. Like I love there be more card draw in the game. I love that we have combo outside of Ezreal now, and it's all good. Like it's
huge.
Fun. It's huge, yeah.
So go ahead, Swim. Go ahead. No, go ahead.
All right. I was just gonna say with the watch list, based on kind of everything we've seen and how they have done it, what it communicates to me is very reassuring. The devs are basically saying this is something that will basically get nerfed. We're trying to figure out how best to nerf it, whether that is a direct nerf, and of course then we have to figure out the best way to directly nerf it, or an indirect nerf by nerfing part of the archetype or nerfing some component of it. Like they were saying, Fearsome's on the watch list, they nerfed like 1 or 2 Fearsome cards. That sort of like build around kind of became less of a thing, or whether they indirectly nerf it just by increasing the opportunity cost like they did with Shadow Assassin. And I think that's great. I love the watch list. I really do.
I think to close out kind of the talk about the patch notes and kind of the episode, because it has been going on for quite a while. It's my job as a host to stop this madness.
Let's keep it under 2 hours. Let's keep it under 2 hours. Yeah.
Just to round out, I want to talk about obviously Swim mentioned the devs kind of having an unusual communication process with the community at large with Runeterra compared to other card games. I also want to congratulate the community at large at being fairly decent at recognizing what cards need to be changed. With this survey, I'm going to just mention here. So going into it, the scale I kind of used, anything over a 4 rating is a card that the community thinks needs to be nerfed. Anything from 2 to 4 is fairly balanced, and anything under 2 basically needs a buff. And with the champions, in this, Mogwai's going to take care of putting the graph on the video so you guys know what I'm talking about.
Thank you.
The champions, the 2 champions that got nerfed, were both correctly predicted by the community. Karma at a 4.48 is gonna be nerfed, and Vi at a 4.25 is gonna be nerfed. So clap for the community. Ezreal Third champion, 391. So 3.80 to 4 is generally like the watch list territory. Ezreal is on the watch list. Clap for the community. Shen and Vladimir, both under 2. Shen's at 1.77. Vladimir's at 1.67. The only 2 champions under 2, both going to get buffed. Clap for the community. And looking at the problematic cards, the top 10 is basically from 3.8 and above, so nerfs and watch list territory. Every one of those cards is either being nerfed or on the watch list, except for one. Will of Ionia sneakily goes through and dodges any kind of balancing activity from the dev team, maybe in the future.
I mentioned this to Panda like a while back. I think I don't know how you feel about this one, but I do think we may very well see Will of Ionia eventually end up at 5 cost.
Yeah, I agree completely.
Yeah.
I'd love to touch on that more, but I've been like holding in my a Wii for a really long time.
Okay, go ahead.
I
can expand a bit on the idea. We were talking about it before we started recording. Overall, sure, burn is an exception, but overall, with everything else, I think the game has become a lot slower. It's more, control heavy with Karina control. Like in the closed beta, at certain stages, thinking about using a deck that goes to 9-10 mana where it goes online at that mana was unthinkable. Like everything was kind of mid-rangey. And when War Mother control became a thing, was considered like this crazy, like new way to play the game, almost like going super late into the game was like, what? Who does this? No, it's impossible. And then like Spooky Karma, and then very late game Karina control, of course, as well. Before it was all like very mid-rangey.
Very mid-range,
And as this has continued going on with Burn getting nerfed now a bit as well, it'll kind of take the average a bit, the game length a bit higher as well. Cards like Will of Ionia and cards like Unyielding Spirit become better because they're much more viable to play them. When you're playing Will later on in the game, it has a much stronger effect because you're using it to counter and out-tempo big unit plays like Ledros, like Deep, for example, etc.
Even Lux Karma in the mirror and stuff. Like the Will of Ionia is super important there, yeah.
And Unyielding is the same problem where it's not as crazy to get an 8-mana card and be able to play without losing out on too much tempo because the game length is generally higher. So those two are cards like they fall into that same category, and I think nerfing the Will to 5 is correct in that regard because of how the game is, it's become even better than what it was before. It used to not be that big of a problem.
Yeah,
I think that Will is, and I see nobody ever talking about this. I think Will is and has been for a very long time one of the most oppressive cards in the meta.
Yeah,
and that it might sound like a weird statement. But there's a couple of reasons why. The first, so anyone who plays in tournaments, the meta for the longest time, basically since the start of the game, has been just ban Ionia and build other things.
Yeah.
The biggest reason for that is because when you ban Ionia, there's Deny and there's Will, and for a while Deny was bigger because it was 3 mana. Will's probably a bit bigger now. But when you ban Deny and Will, you open up yourself to much more deck building options that Will is limiting.
Yes.
And what that is a sign of is that the meta is being oppressed. I'm going to use that word. It's lowered the diversity in the same exact way.
100%.
And once it's 5 mana, there will be a lot more things you can do. Like when you build a tournament deck, you feel like, oh wow, I can build so many things that I can't run on ladder, and it's because you're banning Ionia.
I've like one of the things that I want to do in like a future tournament is I want to like again ban Ionia and maybe like bring a Braum deck that could perform well. Like Braum is actually not a bad champion at all, but Will of Ionia just kind of like says no to him, right? Like he's an example of like a champion and a strategy just completely oppressed by the existence of that card. Any sort of strategy that revolves around like buffs or basically like committing a little bit more than average on one unit specifically, just that's just not a thing that you can justify competitively in ladder when Ionia is a thing and Will of Ionia is a thing, right? So completely agree. I think it's low-key the most oppressive card in the game actually, and I think it going up to 5 cost is a matter of time, and it's not a matter of like if it's gonna happen, it's just a matter of when, right?
Exactly.
So,
I couldn't agree more.
So yeah,
and it's gonna seem weird, to like, especially if you come from other card games. But the thing about Runeterra is like every spell is overcosted, and it needs to be because of spell mana. Like Vengeance at 7 mana. If you come from another card game, your first impression, you look at Vengeance and you're like, wow, this card is unplayable. And then you realize as you play more and more of the game, it's actually a competitive staple. So the idea of Will needing a nerf at 4 mana is gonna seem strange at first, but like trust me, the way spell mana works in the game, it does make it kind of necessary for a healthy meta.
Yep. All right, I think that's a good point to end the talk here. We had quite a long episode today, but honestly, I really liked it. I think we really talked quite a bit about every card, and we covered pretty much everything about the patch. And what a patch, man! A lot of changes. Overall, my impressions are I'm very excited for the metagame that will envelop after this. The vast majority of the changes, I'm very, very, very content with, and I'm looking forward to see how this will shape things up. And I'm very, very excited for the next few weeks as I'm gonna get brewing, and I know Swim is going to as well.
Oh,
and,
yeah,
it's gonna be fun. I'll let you guys outro yourselves and all that stuff, but I'm gonna say shout outs to Swim and Panda. If you guys want to check them out, Swim is a fellow YouTuber and streamer. You can check out his YouTube channel, Swimstrim, and his Twitch channel, which has the same name, and also his website, swimstrim.com, where he posts his take on the tier list regarding the metagame, and you can see deck list posted there. It's a very reliable resource, especially if you're getting into the game. You want to see what decks are strongest and all that stuff. Make sure to check that out. And big shout outs to ImpetuousPanda as well. He streams 3 times a year, so make sure to not miss that. But actually,
is it up to 3?
2. Yeah, I'm being a bit optimistic here, but it may actually go up because your boy is looking to get into it this summer. So watch out for that, and obviously check out his surveys. They're very well done, and I was also honestly very impressed by the overall how accurate the community was this time around. And I think it's a very, very nice tool, and it really helps us out go over these patches as well. So keep that, check that out as well. Follow him on Twitter. And if you guys want to say anything, now's the time.
I mean, you pretty much covered everything.
Yeah,
I mean, you mentioned the website. I recently updated the matchup tips section on the website. I think it's a very useful tool that I, for some reason, have been completely I kind of didn't keep it up to date after the second week after launch. But I recently updated it.
You got lazy.
It always feels weird shilling your own stuff. There's the nice thing about my website is because A, I'm not monetizing it at all, and B, it's not nobody finds me through my website. Nobody Googles Runeterra website. This doesn't show up on searches. It's just a useful tool that I throw up for you guys, and I think the matchup tip section will be really useful for a lot of new players.
Yeah, I think you covered it all on my side. Like Mogwai said, I'll be moving actually next week for June, and hopefully sorting out some internet issues and getting a new PC as well. I had some problems with that as well. But yeah, hopefully I'm looking to start streaming in 2-3 weeks. So stay on the lookout for that.
Watch out. He's got the best emote on Twitch. And thank you guys for sticking around. Hope you enjoyed. It was a fun one. And let me know what you guys think in the comment section down below regarding the changes. If you agree, disagree, all that good stuff. And thank you for watching. And I will see you guys in a couple of weeks.